So the question for GT7 is using a pad cheating. Come up many times in many conversations, and I thought I'm going to find out. I think it's about time to have a proper go, having spent years using the wheel and all kinds of sims, and just see what really happens. So I'll pick a track with really abysmal conditions and a car which isn't that easy to drive and has a propensity to oversteer and into corners as well as out of corners. And let's see what the difference is. Greetings, fellow sim racers. So I've been doing some races recently. I've been noticing pad users seem to be getting away with murder with a lot of things. Everyone knows pad. I'm a wheel user normally, but everyone knows pad is very easy to catch spins and slides and stuff. But I was, having never played pad, was curious as to just how easy that is. So I thought I'd do some tests. Difficult car to drive, been driving recently. Wet weather, no traction control. And this is my, apart from a couple of other little dabbles here and there, this is probably about the 30th minute I've been playing on pad. No, less than that, 10 minutes. And straight away, yeah, as I expected, this is uber slippery. This is uber slippery, these conditions in this car. And straight away, although I can't feel what's going on, catching the slides is so easy. It's, as you'll find out in this session, you'll see from my lap times, which are great because I'm not a pad user, but you can just stand on the throttle and you'll see from my lap times, and you'll see in this session practically my first ever go on a pad, and I didn't spin once in this session. I had loads and loads of tank slappers, loads and loads of Larry moments, but I never lost the car, which I kind of thought might happen, but I wasn't expecting it to be quite that easy. But there's a few other things I noticed on pad, and hopefully I can point this out in this video, is that it tends to auto steer very slightly towards the corner, and you can ride curbs like nothing else. So I'm going like this, go right over this curb. I know from experience on a wheel, you're off into the kitty litter if you go full throttle around that. You'll spin so fast you won't know what's happening. But I could get it on there, full throttle, and there was a twitch, easy to catch. It was just nothing. Likewise, full throttle on that curb. You could ride the curbs so easily. And I've did a couple of slow motion analysis, but you can see on some curbs that the car actually corrects its trajectory, even though I'm not putting that input in the pad. So I go full throttle on this curb, and it's quite happy with it, feathering a little bit on the exit, blah blah blah. So on my first lap, it was like a 102.7. My optimal goes down to about a 102.0. That's pretty much my first lap. On a wheel I know it'd be faster, because I'm a wheel user, but still. But as I found out, I started getting more and more Larry, deliberately more Larry, just to see how absolutely ham-fisted I could get and still get away with it, and see how much of the curbs I could ride. See that I can feel an auto steer into the corner. And then I found out if you dab at the throttle, like I'm doing there, you can kind of control it. You'd never do that in real life, simcade or whatever, but you can sort of like stab at the throttle, and the micro corrections it does is just enough to stop the back end getting out, but doesn't seem to really affect you. I've seen people doing this on pad, and they just stab at the throttle. I assumed, because I've set up the stick, the analog stick, I assumed they were on a button pressing X, and they just stab at the throttle because they didn't have much choice. But I reckon they're actually on a stick and they're just whacking it forwards and releasing it. There, you can see an auto steer into the corner. So watch the red dot, it's not moving, and the car starts turning right about now, before I started turning in. Then I turn in and I whack the steering over, but it feeds it in exactly as required to get me to the perfect sort of steering input for the corner. And I can just go on that curb, don't have to do anything with the steering, put my foot down, and it just goes around the corner. So it's a very strange experience, I have to say. Doesn't feel at all natural, but there you go, full throttle on that curb, a little bit of correction on there, but fine, you know, just yeah, whatever, deals with it. This has got no traction control in the wet, and I have 500 horsepower car or something, rear wheel drive car, which isn't the easiest of cars to drive. And given this is my first proper go on the pad, that's the closest I got to a spin. Tank slapper, deliberately Larry, still recovered it. You'd have no chance of that in the wheel. So I started stabbing at the throttle, because that seemed to be quite a useful tactic for keeping these. See how much more stable the car is. And I go full throttle on that curb, stab at the throttle a bit, and I barely have to do any correction at all. Really interesting. But by this point, I'm just like, not really bothering about trying to do a decent lap. I'm just like, how far can I take this? How much can I just slam the throttle down, whack the steering left and right, and still keep the car on the tarmac? And it's that amount of throttle, that amount of slide, that you shouldn't be able to control that car. And there's also my theory of auto corrections, which is very clear in some corners. So this, standing on the throttle, and the car sort of twitches left and right, but I'm not doing much with the steering input. In fact, I'm not actually working towards to correct that at all. But if I slow it down, you can see me going with the curve. So looking at the dot, and look at the white line. So the white line starts snaking left and right as the throttle's going down. I'm not doing much at all with the input, and I'm certainly not counter steering. But you can see the car sort of automatically straightens itself up, full throttle, almost no input, but it's sort of tiny little corrections that just keep the car just pointing the way the game wants you to point, basically. And then I notice how much you can stand on the brakes. Look at this, stand on the brakes, no attempt at trail braking at all, and the car happily makes a corner and goes round it. So it kind of it's on pad, it's got to, because you don't have the kind of the fine control that you have on the wheel and pedals. You've got less degrees of input, so it has to help you in some way. But look at me, full throttle, that's uber slippery through there. You go full throttle in there, and on a wheel you're off. So anyway, did a few laps. Could have gone quicker with practice, but at 2.0 optimal time, I will destroy that on the wheel, because I've been using the wheel for 5 years, 6 years, and the pad for like half an hour. So I'll easily beat the time on the wheel. But I thought I'd try riding that curb, and like I was on the pad, straight off. Nice slow motion slide. Okay, can't do that then. What about I go full throttle over this corner? No, I won't be having that. And I immediately have to feather and get out of it. I mean, okay, I can feel the grip. That makes total sense. But I thought I'd go around first off to see if I could do the same sort of things I was doing on the pad, which is riding the curbs, planting the throttle, where I dare, and just see if I can get it to, well, do the same thing basically, or not do the same thing. So I'm doing this heavy on the brakes, understeer out as I'd expect, not even full throttle, and around I go. Not even close. Here, touch this curb, whee, and then suddenly fighting for control again. I knew that was going to happen, so I was ready for that. Wasn't so ready for that one. try to go full throttle on this curb. Ah, no, you can't. Not on a wheel. Instant lose the back end. And then here I thought I'd go full throttle on this exit curb and see what happens. Like I was on the pad. No, instant spin. The thing is, you can't catch it. On the pad, I'd have instantly be able to catch that, even though I couldn't have felt it. The wheel, I could feel that was happening, but you can't counter steer fast enough, even if you've got lightning hands. So again, now I'm standing on the brakes and understeer well wide, and then catch the curb with that much throttle, and it's another spin. You just can't do it. So then the correct habits start kicking in on the wheel, and you start feathering the throttle precisely. Even then, touching that curb still sends you out. You can't touch it. Okay, I'm going to ride at this curb over here and go full throttle, and nope, it just will not be done. It cannot be done. Not reliably. So I thought, right, okay, enough of this messing around. Let's just see if I can do a proper lap, as I would properly on a wheel. So avoiding the slippery bits, avoiding the curbs because I know they're slippery on a wheel. And you can't just ride over them on the pad. I mean, the pad, it's like the curb's almost not there. On the wheel, you're going in, so I'm having to feather the brakes, get into the corner, and then I'm feathering the throttle, not full throttle, about 80, 75, 80%. Because if I go full throttle, I'll just spin. And I'm having to feather the brakes into this corner because it's not going to kind of like auto steer me in. Stay away from that curb. Feathering the throttle on all these slippery bits around here. Staying well away from that curb. And even then, I can't go full throttle completely on that exit. Because you can just feel that you haven't quite got the grip. So yeah, I thought this was a pretty safe lap, but nothing fancy. Just got to go around this corner, bit of throttle. Whoops! Oh no! Even then, you still end up in a nice spin, and it will spin so fast on the wheel that sometimes you got no chance of catching it, even if you got ninja hands. So I thought, oh right, okay, let's do that again. Let's do another proper, a serious lap. So I've got to come in. I can't do full braking if I want to get to the apex. I can't do full throttle on the exit. I've got to be very, very careful on that curb if I'm going to use it. And then I've got to be careful on the brakes and trail it in nicely. Tiny amount of brake. Don't touch the throttle if you're on that curb, or don't touch that curb. Go around. Avoid this slippery bit carefully. That's about half throttle. Don't go anywhere near that curb. Still can't go full throttle around there because it's too slippery. And if I get a twitch, very difficult to get back. But of course, what you miss on the wheel in terms of being helped by these little micro corrections is encoded into the pad is you get the precision and feel on a wheel. So on a pad, you know, hand-fisted, not really got the dexterity or the skills for it. I'm sure, you know, it'd probably take a few months of use before you really got used to it. Not that I ever want to get used to it. But yeah, on the wheel, it's so much more dainty, and you're looking at tiny percentages of inputs: throttle, steering, brakes, and you're driving on edge. Every time you go on a curb and a wheel, you're almost kind of bracing yourself. On a pad, I was finding almost instantly, as soon as you realise how easy it was to catch oversteer modes, you kind of didn't care. You just bury the throttle. Don't do much with the steering and let the physics of how the pad works sort it out for you. But yeah, the difference, I mean, you can see from my lap times, how many spins did I have? 3, 4 on a wheel that I've been using for years versus a pad I hadn't been using at all, and I didn't spin once on the pad, and I was being stupidly Larry, and I was just getting away with murder. So of course the question is using a pad a cheat? Well, no. Is it an exploit? Partly, I would say. I mean, everything you do in any physics engine for any sim is a lot of the time, yeah, you want it to be accurate, but a lot of the time you're trying to work out what the physics will kind of allow you to do, which you wouldn't necessarily be able to do in real life. But it's clear that the way the steering, the braking, the accelerating, the grip, the curb use is all almost like a different game. I mean, yeah, okay, so some people don't have a wheel, and they have no choice but to use the pad, and you've got to make it playable on the pad, and that's fair enough. And of course, with a pad, you don't have the degrees of precision you'll get on a wheel. So a wheel's got, in the case of my wheel, over 1,000 degrees of input, and the pedals have got, I don't know, several inches of input. So versus about an inch on your analog sticks on a pad. So you've got to be able to cater for that. So there are going to be differences, but I think the thing that's, obviously that small movement of the pad makes it very, very easy and quick to catch slides, which everyone sort of knows. I've seen pad users get cars completely sideways and still recover it. If you're following as a wheel user, you're just chuckling to yourself. But of course, the pad users will miss out on the precision, and that's the thing I found hardest. I mean, not much use of a pad at all. I'm completely inexperienced, no skill whatsoever. But yeah, the hardest bit I found on the pad was actually being consistent. As I say, after a while, I started going, right, what will it allow me to do? How Larry can I get? But so you got to make up for that lack of precision, and that kind of like the auto. There's a slight auto steer going in, approaching corners that it does for you, and the amount of input on the stick, I was just whacking it over, but the actual dot, the steering input, would take time to move over, so it can govern how much steering input you really need to get into the corner, which should in theory make hitting your apexes easier, but as I say, I wasn't necessarily finding it that easy on the pad. But nevertheless, it's like it's got a steering assist, a brake assist, a stability control system all built in, which is, even with all the assists off, they're still there, and it's to make it more playable. Yeah, I get that. And as I say, I had almost no, I don't know, before haptic feedback wasn't, yeah, it wasn't realistic at all, of course, because it's on your fingers, but there wasn't any sort of force feedback or information on the pad at all. But you just don't need it. The game just gives you the option not to have to worry about that, and you can correct everything by eye. You can't go by eye on a wheel. You have to feel things before you actually see them happening on screen. If it happened on screen, you're already way too late to do anything about it on a wheel. But on the pad, you can just whack the steering over, and it will do your counter steering, as I'm noticing just there. If you need counter steer and you're whacking the steering left and right, it will whack left and right, so you get instant, crossing your hands on the wheel, instant. But if you're going into a corner and you whack the steering in, it will feed it in for you. So it's a steering assist which helps, a braking assist which helps you angle towards the corner. I mean, it's a lot of help, really. It's a lot of help, and I get that it has to be there. Is it a cheat? It's an exploit. Yeah, but it's a very different experience. I'll tell you that. It's very different. I just can't believe how much you can just go on the curbs, even in the wet, and just stand on it and off you go. And as in forwards. You're on the wheel, off you go, but sideways. So the pros, the passive steering assist, what I'm going to call it, is where it does little micro corrections. Just as you need a little bit of counter steer, it will do that for you, and you don't have to do anything with the stick. And then of course, you got the turning, and then there was a definite moment where it would have your car turning into the corner, even if you didn't have any input in the stick. You would put the input in the stick normally because you'd see the corner coming, but it would just help you out a little bit. And then there's, of course, the instant counter steer. That's the big thing everyone knows about. I mean, you can just whack left and right instantly. It makes remarkable saves possible. And then there's this braking assist. So I didn't feel the need so much to do trail braking. I'm sure there is. I'm sure you'd be faster with it. But a lot of times I could just stand on the brakes and the ABS would just help me out. It's almost like the ABS works slightly differently to what it does on a wheel, and it just kind of still allows you to like maybe turn or not have the back end come out, which you wouldn't necessarily get on the wheel. And then of course these all sort of combine to an automatic sense for putting in the right amount of steering input you need. So if you're coming into a corner, you don't whack the steering over, you feed it in. But if you whack the stick over, it still feeds the steering in. But if you come to need a counter steer and you whack the steering over, it will whack the steering over. So the game knows when you need fast steering or slow steering. If anyone's ever played Revs, the very original first sim racing game, shows my age, if you held the spacebar down and steered with the keys, it will give you fast steering. If you let go of the spacebar and still steer with the same keys, it will give you slow steering, and it's almost like it's doing that automatically for you. And of course the cons, well, I was using left stick to turn and right stick for braking and accelerating, as I used to play Gran Turismo 2, 3, 4, whatever, years and years ago. I figured I'd do something like that. I think you can obviously get your haptic feedback if you use your L2 and R2 buttons or whatever. But you know, with that setup, there's no force feedback at all. So you don't get that. But then, as I said, it appears you just don't need it. The thing that I didn't have at all couldn't live with at all was the lack of precision. I was missing apexes, missing shifts, missing braking points. You know, when I was putting the throttle down, it was either too little or too much. I mean, that's going to come with use. I imagine there's plenty of people out there using pad who can put the precise amount in they need. But that's only with the throttle and brake. You don't apparently seem to need that with the steering, which is where it helps you out. And the thing that gets me the most is those things and the way it drives, and this is a personal bugbear, but it just doesn't feel realistic at all. Not just in the fact that you're driving a car with a couple of joysticks, but that it doesn't seem to handle like a car. It almost feels like a bit like a shopping trolley, but but a shopping trolley that you got perfect control of, so you can flick directions instantly when you want, rather than the typical shopping trolley which is all over the place. It just felt horrible, really disgusting. I'm glad I'm really slow on it. I could get quicker, surely, but I don't want to try. I'm not interested at all. It just, when you sat in a rig behind a wheel with pedals, you feel like you're at least in a sim and you're kind of driving a car virtually. But when you sat there on a pad, it just feels like any other computer game, really. It's completely unrewarding. I totally recommend anyone who's got a pad and is thinking about getting a wheel. Yes, probably seeing that, you'll find it a lot harder to start off with, but it'll be a lot more natural and a lot more rewarding once you come to do it. And when you get used to it, and you will get used to it, it's all about perseverance. But yeah, no, yuck. But you will definitely find the wheel harder. And then the other thing I didn't cover in that video was I've seen many people use pad with tyre wear on, and every one of them destroys their tyres, and in seriously short order as well. And I reckon that's down to the tiny little micro corrections it's constantly doing that you can't control. And those little inputs absolutely ruin your tyres. And to be honest, I hope that remains, because if you get really good on pad, from what I've seen, you should be quicker than you are on a wheel, because you can use more curb, which means you can use more track, which means you can take bigger apexes, which means you can go faster. And if you go past the limit, you can catch it. So not only will you be faster, but you'll be more consistent and much less likely to spin. That's why I kind of like, is that a cheat? Yeah, but as I say, the less precision and the way it destroys tyres probably balances that out. So if you ever run in a lobby and you think you've got people with pads on there and they're fast, just stick tyre wear on. It will balance it out.